جود مورنينج عن جديد. بعرف انه نحن ما عملنا زوم كول صرنا كثير زمان، ما عملنا زوم انترفنشن صرنا كثير زمان، بس فيني اخبركم انه اشتقنا لكم كثير، اشتقنا للقعده مع بعضنا، اشتقنا نكون مع بعضنا، اشتقنا نتعلم اشياء كثير حلوه. ومعنا اليوم سربرايز جيست من امريكا. اليوم عم بلاقينا شخص كثير فهمان، شخص شغلته بيرماكولتشر. شو هي البيرماكولتشر؟ حكينا عنها عده مرات. في كثير ناس بتروح اكستريم وتقول انا بشتغل اورجانيك، ما بدها وصعب كثير يكون شيء اسمه ناتشرال، شيء بستاندرد معين بيكون نظيف، تا واحد يكون مقتنع ياكل شيء كثير طيب هو لاولاده، مرتب، ما بيسمم، من الطبيعه. فينا نقول شوي البيرماكولتشر هلا كمان بنرجع نفوت بكل التفاصيل مثل ما كانوا جدودنا يعملوا زراعه. رح اليوم نتعرف على دانيال هالسي اللي هو عم بلاقينا من امريكا. رح نعمل معه 4 زوم كونفرنسز كل نهار تنين بذات الوقت، هالجمعه واللي بعده واللي بعدها، لكل واحد اذا عم بيزرع يتعلم شيء جديد، اذا فايد بالزراعه يتعلم شيء جديد، اذا حاسس عباله يفهم هيدي الزراعه بس ما بيعرف وين بده يبلش. هذا الشغله كثير صعبه اللي عم نكتشفها عن جديد دائما. بدي ابلش بس ما عم بعرف من وين بلش. طيب اليوم رح نحكي بكل هالتفاصيل. الزوم كول بالانجليزي اكيد، رح نرجع نترجم شوي على العربي اند فايس فيرسا، فخليكم معنا. وحيلا سؤال عندكم اياه ما تنسوا تكتبون، نحن نقريهم كلهم. معنا اليوم إلي، معنا مارك، معنا دانيال، all together. والكاميرا الجديده مثل ما شايفين very good quality and very proud of our new technology. طيب مارك، ميرسي على هالاوبورتونيتي اللي عم تعطينا اياها كلنا سوا. بليز إلي عرفونا على دانيال قبل ما نبلش نهار.
يعني انا بس بدي اقول بالعربي بالاول انه انتوني لما تجيب نيو تكنولوجيز وكاميرات فكر برفقاتك الكاميرات بعدهم مشتري ظابطه. هيدا شغله ما حدا عم يسمعنا وانت تمام. سو انا رح تكون مثل ما قلت انت بالانجليزي سيشن تبع دانيال، بس رح نجرب انا وإلي نترجم دغري. انا رح اترك هلا إلي عارف عن دانيال، برجع انا بخبر بالانجليزي هيك اكسبيرينس صغيره مع دانيال بنبلش معه. مثل ما انت قلت انه الفكره الاساس انه نتعلم عن جد شو البيرماكلتشر. انا سافرت كذا مره مع دانيال، عنده اكسبيرينس خياليه. هلا رح ارجع اقولها بالانجليزي، بس انا شوي من اللي بعرفه هلا هو بيكوز اوف دانيال يعني. فهيدي الشغله كثير مهمه، تسمعوا قد ايه بيعرف وبسافر كثير بلدان وبنقدر نتعلم كثير معه. So first of all I would like to say hi to Daniel, and Eli will introduce you and then we move on to the presentation.
So hello and welcome everybody to our series of new sessions about permaculture with the expert Mr. Daniel Halsey from live from the USA. Let's introduce a little bit Mr. Halsey. So Mr. Daniel Halsey is a certified permaculture and professional agro-ecosystems designer. Daniel owns a Bachelor of Science degree in Temperature Climate Polyculture Design and a Master of Professional Studies in Horticulture from the University of Minnesota. He is hired to design private homesteads, international communities, and broad-acre restoration and economic development systems. And he teaches in several countries like Haiti, Nepal, Lebanon, especially in Beirut, Senegal, South Africa, Costa Rica, Canada, and of course across the United States and the United Kingdom. Daniel is the founder of United Designers, a global ecological design cooperative and principal partner of the Natural Capital Plant database. Dan is the co-author and contributing author for 3 books on sustainability. So thank you, Dan, for joining us and welcome to our sessions. I have to introduce a little bit what's coming next after these sessions. So this is a session of introduction. Daniel will be introducing the permaculture, what is permaculture. And in the second session, we'll be having how to plan an urban farm. And the third session, Daniel will be speaking about vegetable garden needs. And in the final session, Daniel will be speaking of vermicompost to have a brief introduction about permaculture. Welcome, Dan, and we're glad to hear you for all our sessions. And let's start by what is permaculture?
Well, thank you, and thank you for the introduction. I really appreciate being here. Oh, and by the way, I'm wearing my University of Toronto t-shirt today from my friends in Canada. Yes, thank you. And I'd like to say hi to all my friends in Lebanon, one of my dearest friends there, and one of my favorite countries that I visited that taught me so many things over my years of trips there in teaching and in traveling. But permaculture is one of the things that I found in the early 2000s that really did change my life. And to the point where eventually it changed my career, how I live, and everything that I do. Permaculture is, to me, it's basically absolute sustainability. It's responsibility and its stewardship of our lives, taking control of our lives, taking control of our resources that come to us, and also realizing a lot of health benefits from having organic vegetables that you might grow yourself. And it really does help you make all the decisions through your life in order to do things for long term and have long-term benefits going forward. One of the things that I found in the beginning when I got into permaculture is the biggest surprise I had, which a lot of people realize, is what food is. And my original entry into permaculture was having been in the hospital. I had sepsis, toxic shock, a blood infection, lost about 25 pounds. And one of the doctors, while I got through that, at the end, he said, one of the things you're going to need to do is learn what food is. And when I got to learn what food really was, and I started growing my own food, first with peppers and tomatoes, I also got to learn what food tastes like, real food tastes like. Everything that people find out in permaculture when you start to do things on your own is the reality of the original flavors, the original nutrition, and the ease of doing it. Growing your own food is amazing, and using the principles of permaculture and the practices that we have, it doesn't matter where you are, what part of the world that you're in, is that you can grow a fair amount of food in very small places with some adaptation many times to the climate, but also making your own soils, collecting your own water, and really using the resources and permaculture principles to build that resilience in your life, and also to sustain yourself, your family, and your friends, and then your whole community as more people get involved. I have many friends in permaculture now that are growing food, and they can supply the food for 7 families from one person. And I just think that's amazing, and that's the strength of this. What I'd like to do is go through a short introduction on permaculture and some of the slides and a PowerPoint. Is that okay to do now? Or do you have more questions?
Yes, we can do it. Just a quick translation. لنقول انه دانيال كان عم بيقول لنا شو هي البيرماكلتشر، كنا انه تنختصرها بكلماتنا هي طريقه زراعه مثل جدودنا كانوا يعملوا، نزرع كرمال نقدر ناكل ونطعم عائلتنا وهيك. وشيء انتوني بضل يعيده دائما يلي هو نرجع اذا بدكم نتعلق بالارض والطعم بتكون مغيره وكل شيء بيكون مغير. هلا رح يبلش يخبرنا شو هن البرنسبلز تبع. دانيال جو اهيد.
Thank you. So I'm going to share the screen here, and if you like, Mark, also I can take breaks for translation, or I can speak slower also, which I probably should do anyway for that. But if a question comes up anytime, I'll watch the screen and be sure to answer any questions if I'm not being clear about something. But of course, I will do this, will try to take about 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and then you can have all the time for questions also. So I'll open up the presentation here. Here we are. So this is, when you talk about permaculture, one of the very important things to remember is that this is a new language. Permaculture in English, I always say, is archaic in general, and maybe a lot of languages are archaic to the people speaking them when you're trying to communicate. I don't know. But we have our own vocabulary, and we have to explain things in a new way. There is also what comes with this new language is a new vision. And then from that, we bring a new future. So the many things that we talk about in permaculture, we actually have to create our own terms in our own language because the cultures that we're in do not describe the things that we would like to do. So one of the things that permaculture does is it brings us beyond sustainability. We're not trying to just sustain ourselves. We're trying to create resources. And this is what we call the carrying capacity, which is very much a scientific term. It's how much food can I grow on my land? How many animals can I graze in a field? It is limited. That is called the carrying capacity of any ecological system, any farm, whatever it might be. This is what we're trying to raise. In all of my work, the carrying capacity is defined in the beginning. That is what we're measuring. And then what we're working for is to raise how many chickens, how many goats, what can we grow here? How many tomato plants, how many potatoes? That needs to increase every year because many times we're starting in an area that has been depleted. So in that sense, we're adopting a strategy for long-term behavior rather than short-term forecasting. We are thinking about years. Native Americans used to grow 2 years of food every season. They had to because they had to store food and they never knew what would happen the next year. Very amazing to hear about the history of indigenous communities and how much they actually had to grow to sustain themselves and to ensure that. Carrying capacity is developed as a gauge for forecasting, also collapse. If you are trying to extract more than your land can produce, your soil will collapse. Everything will collapse. If you take too many animals from the environment, you won't have enough animals to create more animals. So carrying capacity is used to guide us so that we don't extract too much. And then once your system has collapsed, it's very hard to rebuild, as you can imagine. We're also trying to sustain a steady state with different types of management. We're trying to create and have a consistent amount of food able to grow wherever we're doing that. So every time we take vegetables out, we have to make sure that we're actually building soils at the same time. That's why this is beyond sustainability. We also need to increase our resources for that. And then overexploitation of labor or nature results in social and ecological collapse at the same time. If we're pulling too much water out of our well before it can sustain and refill, it's going to fill up with something else, like salt water. In the island of Ibiza and other areas, where the wells have been basically pulled out beyond their capacity, they are now filling with seawater. A very bad situation. So carrying capacity and beyond sustainability is really the focus in permaculture. It's sustainable living, meaning that we provide for our needs and the needs of the rest of the world by also ensuring future generations can meet their needs. So basically, in a sense, everybody's got to eat. The birds have to eat, the bees have to eat, the organisms in the soil need something to eat, along with us. So we need to very much sustain everybody, and keeping in mind that everything in our living system that helps us grow and stay alive also needs to consume materials and nutrients. So this is where we create a natural wealth, more wealth than we consume in this area. So permaculture is basically broken down into permanent agriculture. Agri in the land and permaculture basically is bringing these two things together. So we want to create permanent systems, just like a forest. A forest does not need anything from us. It is self-contained after many, many generations of developing itself in succession. The same thing we can do when we grow our food. Also in permaculture, we have a post-culture of consumerism. We're trying to get out of consumerism and developing more of our resources with food system, transportation, construction systems, waste management. All of this is permaculture. We're looking for solutions in all of these states, all of these situations, in order to have a better world and not be wasting nutrients and not be wasting materials that are so important for our future. So why permaculture? Our resource neglect has made our current system terminal. We are running out of resources. We need to build resources and build capacity as much as we can. We need to create a better system for our welfare and those in the future. We have to take a long-term view. Permaculture does this because we try to build more nutrients than we consume. We try to build more soil than we extract when we do our gardening and our food. We need to take responsibility for ourselves and our world and not keep thinking that other people are going to manage it. In permaculture, we manage our own resources. Obviously, then we have to be responsible for that. And then we also dispel the myth that all of the above is out of our control. I can control my waste. I can control my food sources. I can control my life. And in that sense, I can actually control the wealth that I have as long as it's an ecological wealth, so that I can grow everything that I need and sustain myself and my family. one of the things we like to talk about in permaculture, and this is from Bill Mollison, who started permaculture in the 80s with David Holmgren. He wrote a book called The Designer Manual. It's a very, very thick book about permaculture. It's basically the book everybody reads, called The Designer Manual from Bill Mollison. But one of the things he says in there is that the problem is the solution. When something breaks, we have an opportunity to fix it long lasting. It's a sign of things that are changing, and we need to take care of these things before they go beyond a point of repair. So problems are opportunity. Feedback is for nature's quality control. Motivation for lasting change. It's an opportunity to improve, and it also brings us a new paradigm. When things break, when we observe them, we have a better understanding of how they work. We also can understand then how we might help it not break next time and how we can fix it longer lasting for the future. Problems are also indicators. Weeds growing in the ground, when you see weeds growing in a field, that tells you what's going on in the soil. Many plants grow in a specific situation. And as a lot of people I know that recognize plants and plant systems, they can tell what's going on in the soil just by what plants are showing up on the top. Insects are also indicators. This is about observation. And in permaculture, we have to do a lot of observation to see what's going on before we make our decisions. And then people are also indicators. The people that are highly sensitive to chemicals, the people that cannot eat the foods that other people eat, are actually indicating to us maybe there's a problem within our system. So problems that we see in our world are also indicators that change that needs to be made. So in permaculture, one of the things we're also finding is that we've lost information. If you can bring in more information from the past, how were things being grown? How were things being brought to the market? Many times we've lost that information. We don't really know what's coming and where it's coming from anymore. Do you have a question, Mark?
Yes, just to make a small break and to translate what you have said. Okay. Anthony, you want to say something?
I'm enjoying the talk and listening and learning more things we can discuss around the villages of Lebanon. Please, for the ones who do not understand English, Mark, feel free to translate.
Okay, great. So أنا رح ترجم على السريع اللي كان عم بقوله دانيال. بس تقول انه هلا معلي عم ترجم على اللبناني ولي انت بدك تترجم البارت الثاني. انه انا حسيت هلا اللي عم بيحكيه بيختصر كثير شو كنا انا وانتوني عم نحكي لاخر شهرين. قد ايه البرماكلتشر هي نفكر بالزراعه، اكيد بدنا ناكل، بس نفس الوقت بدنا نفكر بالارض وبالاستدامه. وخبرنا دانيال انه هذا الشيء منه بقى هيك اسطوره، ولازم نبلش نقتنع انه اذا بدكم الريسورسز تبع الارض عم يخلصوا، وشوي شوي لازم نرجع نجدد حالنا. هلا بعد شوي رح نرجع نساله لدانيال انه انا فكر ازرع بطريقه مستدامه، هل هذا الشيء براكتيكال وبتعمل 7 مليار اللي احنا صرنا هلا بنشوف؟ بس خبرنا اذا بدنا نختصرها انه في زراعه، بس في الزراعه المستدامه اذا بدكم، وهيك خلقت كلمه بيرماكلتشر، يعني من شيء مستدام ومن زراعه بنفس الوقت. وكثير حبيت الفكره اللي قالها انه الامريكان القديمين كانوا يزرعوا لسنتين لما ما كانوا يعرفوا يعملوا مونه. هذه انتوني بدنا نحكي عنها كثير، نبقى بعدين نشوف الوضع، لانه دائما انتوني بيقول انه المونه هي شغله لبنانيه رهيبه فكروا فيها جدودنا، لازم نساله عن هالموضوع. باختصار عم بخبرنا انه هل الزراعه على طريقه مستدامه هي عن جد تزبط، هي فيها تنعمل، وما تصدقوا اللي بيقولوا لكم لا، ومضطرين انه نقدر نغير هالاشياء لنقدر نكمل لقدام. So Daniel, I tried to translate in my own words a little bit what you were saying, and maybe you can continue unless we have questions or something.
Yes, أنا بس لحتى أزيد شوي على اللي انقال. So دانيال عرف عن permaculture. شو يعني permaculture؟ هي الزراعة المستمرة، الاستمرارية بالزراعة، وشمل إنه الزراعة هي مش بس الأرض والماء، هي كمان نحن، هي كمان الحيوانات اللي عايشة معنا. خبر كمان دانيال إنه كل شيء بدل على شيء بالأرض يلي عنا أو بالطبيعة يلي عنا. يعني حيلا عشبة بتطلع، حيلا شتلة بتطلع، ما بنعرف شو هي it's an indicator، يعني هي دليل على شيء صاير عنا بقلب الأرض. ولحتى ما ندمر الهواء والارض تبعنا وصحتنا وحياتنا لازم يكونوا كل هالقصص عم يشتغلوا مع بعضهم. لازم يكون في نوع من السينكرونيزاسيون مع بعض، لحتى لانه اذا تدمر عنصر واحد منهم، يعني اذا الانسان دمر المي فور اكزامبل او الارض، رح يتدمر هو بالاخر. سو هيدا هو ليش البيرماكلتشر موجوده وشو عم بتعلمنا البيرماكلتشر.
Thank you, Eddie. Daniel, you can continue if you want.
Okay. And I'll pause after each slide so you can translate. Would that be better?
No, not direct. Just when an idea is, so we can go faster.
Okay. Yeah. All right. I'll watch for your cues on that. Thank you. Thank you for that. So one of the things we have in permaculture is we have ethics. There are three main ethics in permaculture, and hopefully we can have this translated for you. But the first one is we care for the earth, where we live, how we live, and all the things around us. Caring for the land means caring for our natural resources, making sure we have clean air. We have very diverse flora. We have diverse animals, birds, which are the indicators of a healthy ecosystem. When you see the reptiles, when you see the snakes, when you see all of the other animals living in an area, that means you have a healthy ecosystem. It's when they disappear that you should worry. We have to take care of our waters and lakes, our beaches, the coral reefs, our marine life. Everything is care for the earth, and in that sense, we will provide long-term productivity for the people and their children, protection and the health in the surrounding environment, and protection of health for those who farm the land. That is caring for the earth. And by the way, we are part of the earth. Therefore, we also need to take care of each other in that process. Care for people. Permaculture is improving our opportunities, our living environment, our food supply, and health and well-being. Caring for people is the second, because we are obviously want to take care of each other as we live on the earth. And in that sense, we do that by sharing knowledge and the apps and our assets with other people to help them improve also. So we can improve our food production, the variety, quality, and also preservation and storage. This is very important. We can improve the health and nutrition of everybody. When I was working in Haiti and I'm working with villages there, one of the things I was very much stressing, because obviously in many areas there's a lot of competition, is that everybody needs to win. Everybody needs to contribute to the village. Therefore, everybody needs to have the resources they need to contribute their skills. So we do this by sharing knowledge and working as a community all the time. We develop equal access and opportunity for every individual to learn, to farm, to basically get their needs met, and also to have an opportunity to contribute, and also educate future generations in traditions, natural knowledge, and sustainable systems. Sometimes we lose the past information, because we focus on technology. We focus on all these new gadgets and technology, when really everything that my grandmother knew about growing food and about preparing food, I have no clue. They grew all their own food. They lived on a dairy farm. They had cows where my father lived. They grew all their own food, and they knew everything that it took to have a wonderful life. Then you come to me, I have no clue. This is back when I got into permaculture. So permaculture has basically given me tools to help me care for myself and also other people. And then the last one, ethic in permaculture, is share the surplus. Sharing views and knowledge with neighbors, sharing plants, food, seeds, skills, access. This is like taking care of people, also taking care of the planet. We share our resources, and returning the excess to the soil, and by limiting consumption, we share with the future. So in many cases, people talking about share the surplus means that you give it away. I know many people that say, actually, what I can't use, I put back in the ground, because everything I take from the ground has to be replaced eventually anyway. And then teaching children and listening to elders. This is sharing the surplus. The elders in our community, the people that have done this in the past, that information is hugely important. In many cases, we forget that we're having to reinvent things that other people already knew. generations ago. If we could just listen to the stories, that's what works for us. Would you like to do those 3 ethics, Mark?
Yes, amazing. We just learned amazing information. I think that Anthony also loved what you said. So I'll translate directly into Arabic, but just I will say that now people are watching us from Sierra Leone and from South Brazil. So if more people in the chat wants to tell us from which country they are watching, they can say it. Or any question to Daniel. Okay.
I just want to mention, Daniel, that future agricultural engineers are watching these sessions and are learning very lot from what you are saying.
تنترجم على السريع شو قال دانيال وانتوني اذا كان بدك بعدين تزيد. انا هيدا ال3 سلايدات كانوا احلى 3 سلايدات لإلي لهلا لانه خبر على الايثكس تبع البيرماكلتشر، كيف انه نحن بالبيرماكلتشر مضطرين ان نكون يعني بنحب الارض ومش بس نحبها نحترمها ونفكر فيها وهيك. وعم بيقول على شغله كثير مهمه انه لازم نعطي الهم اذا بطل في حيايا ونشوفهم مش اذا شفنا الحيايا. فهذا بفرجي انه كل مخلوق بالطبيعه مهم، حتى بنخاف منهم عندهم مطرحهم، وكثير هيدي الشغله مهمه نعرفها. خبر انه البرماكلتشر مش يعني اذا بدكم اللي عم ندرسه هلا معه انه البرماكلتشر مش هي بس زراعه، هي طريقه حياه، يعني هي فيلوسوفي جديده بتخلينا نتعلم كيف نحسن النوتريشن تبع كل الناس، نفس الوقت كيف نشتغل سوا وكيف كل واحد يكون التشينج. وقال شيء كثير 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 مهم، سوري رح اقولها هيك، انا هيدي كانت البي اتش دي تبعي، هو نتعلم من الالدرز تبعنا، من الختياريه، من الناس، لانه خبر قد ايه في معلومات عم بتروح بسبب التكنولوجي. خبر قديش اوقات جده كان عنده معلومات بتسطل عن الموضوع وشو يزرع هون اي متى يقطفوا كل هول جنراسيون من بعدها اللي هو ما بيعرف شيء عن الموضوع، وهيدا الشيء كثير مهم. وخبر انه البيرماكلتشر هي كمان نحن نشارك مع بعض الشيء اللي عنا زياده، وهيدا كثير مهمه. وكثير مهم نسمع الاكبر منا ونخبر اولادنا. ما بعرف اذا انتم تحبوا تزيدوا.
100%. سو هاي الفكره عم بيقول لنا انه البيرماكلتشر هي مش بس معاملات زراعيه على الارض، هي ثقافه وتربيه للاجيال اللي هون والاجيال اللي جايه من بعدنا بالاستمراريه المعينه. هي بتعلمك كيف تتعامل مع جارك، كيف تتعامل مع الارض، كيف تحب جدودك، كيف تحب اولادك وشو تعطيهم لبعدين. فهذا الشيء اكيد كثير مهم. عم بيقول كمان انه قد ما التكنولوجي تقدمت، اذا ما في الفاليوز واذا ما في القيم الموجوده ما رح يقدروا يمشوا هيدي التكنولوجي ولا رح ننجح بالشيء اللي نحن عم نعمله.
بنكمل انطونيو؟
بس يعني ما بدي شو بدي ازيد، ما بنزيد شيء لانه بالاخر هذا هو لبنان اللي علمونا عنه جدودنا. فقديش مشينا بالطبيعه وقديش ربينا، يمكن ايام ما كان بعد في ايباد ولا تليفون وكان نمشي بالطبيعه، وكانوا يقولوا لنا انه في هون حشرات. 17 سنه كشافه كانوا اعطيكم الاكسبيرينس تبعها، انه بالاخر نمنا مع الصراصير ونمنا مع النمل ونمنا مع الحياه وعشنا احلى حياه. فهيدي هي الحياه، بس واحد اذا عنده شقفه ارض يحترمها. بس الاحترام بعتقد هو بيرجع هيك بيفسر كل شيء قلناه. Daniel, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So let's go on to a little bit more about the culture of permaculture, and this we call a restorative culture. Also, regenerative culture has been used a lot with permaculture generally now. Both are true. Basically, we regenerate our environment, but we also, as we're working, but many times we need to restore it back to a baseline level in order to have our resources met. This is done by building the natural capital. The actual value of the land is its ability to grow food. Many times people see it as a real estate. They see it as space, right? Location, 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 sometimes they say. But the actual value of the property is the natural capital for the people living on it. And that is restoring healthy soils. Healthy soils grow a lot of food very intensely. We also build natural capital by promoting diversity of plants, not just a monoculture, but many plants working together. And we'll talk about this in the future. A garden can be a forest, a very small forest with lots of diversity and lots of plants, because the plants actually feed each other. in these systems. The forest feeds itself. Our gardens can also feed each other, feed the plants, feed each other, nitrogen, minerals, things like that, and then we get the excess. We also need to capture and store carbon. This is very important in the soil for the organisms there. And as you can see with my little picture here, that's actually buckwheat. And I'm gathering the buckwheat to compost and put back into the soil. That is the carbon that is very important. The other thing we do in a restorative culture is we have to reduce our carbon footprint. And we do that, as you can imagine, when you grow your own foods, when you buy locally and you buy from local farmers and you don't have trucks and things shipped across oceans and across large distances, you reduce that footprint, but you also create a tight community of resources. And to be resilient and to have more stability in your resources, they are localized. People who are good at growing certain vegetables are sustained by other people who can grow other vegetables. Also, you have people who are metalsmiths or woodworkers or electricians. As we work together and we work locally, some people are growing food and other people are making it easy for them to do that, and also then sharing what we can grow. Local materials, as I just mentioned, natural and renewable as much as possible. That's reducing our footprint. And then local and renewable energy sources on here. And if you can see my background here, I'm in my little tiny house on wheels. I actually sold my farm in April and bought this motorhome, and I'm traveling to do my work this way. And I am totally reliant on my resources within this little box. Solar panels on the top, water tanks down below. I am actually living all the principles as I go here and trying to keep my footprint very small, although I basically burn a lot of fossil fuels in the process of doing that. But it really limiting my footprint and staying local with the places where I land also. Limiting consumption, I have to say, is one of the best ways to reduce your dependency on outside resources. Managing your consumption, and there are lots of ways of doing this, using water, reusing water, and how you do it. Food is very valuable, soil is very valuable, our air is very, very valuable. And if we can limit how we use it and we can keep it clean, that means we have more. The less you use, the more you have. We also connect and integrate. And I just wanted to say too, that when we talk about farming, we're always talking or growing food. There are a lot of organisms involved in doing this. Ducks, chickens, goats, sheep, whatever it might be. Having livestock in your living system is very important for cleaning the soil. The manure and the eating and the scratching like of chickens on the land actually creates better soil. The manure that comes from chickens, goats, and all that feeds organisms, but it also helps digest and remove the pathogens from the system. So we also use plants for doing that. All of these have multiple functions, which in permaculture is very important. A lot of needs are being met by all the different organisms, but each organism has many, many functions in our systems. So we use biological and renewable resources. We capture and store energy and materials as in compost. We collect the gray water or we collect water off the roof. And then we can also, within these intense growing systems, we accelerate succession, which means, and succession is the movement of an ecology or an ecosystem to another state, another way of being. We can actually move it faster. Nature has succession. Nature will create soil. Nature will improve the natural capital on the land, but through permaculture principles, we can make that go faster. Within a few seasons, we can take a place that was not even growable with food and make an absolute abundant growing space. We're turning problems into solutions. Just like Bill Mollison was saying, we're finding problematic areas to grow and we're turning them into the solution for growing our food. And I'm gonna let Mark go from there.
Thank you, Daniel. So we'll translate a bit. I will translate and I will cheat a little bit and I will give an example of what we have done in Beersheba and Senegal, so just to give more examples, okay? بس أقول لكم إنه هلا كان عم بخبرنا اكثر غصنا بالبرماكلتشر تنقول لكم انه بالجمعه الجايه واللي بعدها واللي بعدها رح نكون كثير براكتيكال، بس حبينا بالاول نخبركم شو البرماكلتشر. واللي قاله هو هلا انه بالاخر اذا نحن اشتغلنا على التنوع البيولوجي، اذا اشتغلنا على يكون في عندنا حيوانات بقلب الجنينه تبعنا، وهذا شيء كثير 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 مهم. وقد ما فينا نحن نشتغل مثل ما الطبيعه بتعمل، يعني نفهم انه الجنينه ما لازم تكون جنينه، لازم تكون غابه، يعني بطريقه معينه نفكر انه بالجنينه لازم يكون في شيء على العالي، في شيء تحته، في حيوانات، وهيدي شغله كثير مهمه. وشدد كثير على قد لازم يكون في حيوانات عندنا، ان كان دجاج ان كان هيك. بس اخبركم انه مع دانيال نحن سافرنا على السنغال، وهنيك اكتشفنا NGO اسمها بمنطقه اسمها بيرشيبا، يلي هو بالسنغال عندهم كثير معزه اكثر ما تتخيلوا. كان معزه ياكل كل شيء، بمجرد انه سيجوا بصحراء ب10 سنين رجعت الطبيعه ورجعت الغابه. وهونيك بيعملوا دراسات، بيجوا على السنغال ناس من كل العالم بيدرسوا اشياء، وراح اخبركم اللي كان عم بيقولوا اوتر دراسات براكتيكال. يعني جربوا يحطوا دجاج، جربوا يحطوا خنازير، جربوا يحطوا هيك تيشوفوا، وطلع مثلا الكومبوست من الخنازير شيء كثير مهم قدام مهم، الدجاج لما بتمشي بجنينه قدام مهمه. فالفكره هون اللي عم بشدد عليها اهميه نقلد الطبيعه، وبالطبيعه فيها كل الايكو سيستم، هيدي شغله كثير مهمه.
100%. سو الفكره اللي عم بيقولها دانيال انه البيرماكلتشر هي ثقافه اصلاح. يعني اذا نحن عندنا خلل معين او صار شيء بسبب شيء معين بسبب تلوث او شيء ثاني، الثانيه يلي بنبلش نطبق فيها البيرماكلتشر الاسس اللي هو عم يحكي عنهم، بتبلش شوي شوي الطبيعه تصلح نفسها، ببلشوا القصص يعملوا كونكشن مع بعض، ان كان الحيوانات او النبات بين بعضهم، او الحيوانات والنبات، او نحن والحيوانات والنبات، لحتى نصلح المطرح يلي نحن موجودين فيه.
Thank you. So again, Daniel, you can continue. I just explained a bit of what we have done in Beersheba, just as an example.
Okay.
What we have seen in Beersheba, not done.
All right. Thank you. And so I'm just going, I know that we're probably running out of time, and I do want to take a lot of questions because I rather go back and forth when questions rather than just standing out front and just preaching. But a couple other principles that we have as we work within permaculture is we follow nature's patterns. We watch contours, we watch the water flow, the changing of the soils, the sunlight, and all the angles. All of these things are through observation. And the beauty of permaculture is that everything is in a relationship. And so we watch nature's natural arrangements, and we design by cooperation and companionship with nature rather than dominating it and trying to make it do what we want. We try to take what's already doing and help create a better system, like I said, accelerating and helping nature with its processes. This is a very simple example here of a drawing that I've used many times in the past. And this really explains what permaculture is. These are some diagrams of a monoculture on the left, integrated planting in the middle, and then you might say a community or a forest, food forest on the far right. As you can imagine with the monoculture, you have problems with disease, you have problems with locking materials, nutrients become short because all of the plants are pulling the same nutrients out. They're competing with each other. So the worst competition within an agricultural system monoculture is all the plants are the same. They're all wanting the same thing, so they compete with each other. As opposed to interplanting, we mix the cabbage with the carrots, with the tomatoes, and all sorts of things within the space. They actually now are partitioning the soil, and we have a lot of diversity growing there. Some of these plants feed the other plants. They make them even taste better by having that. Also, if there's pests or disease, if one plant gets diseased, it's very specific to that plant or that species, it cannot spread to the other plants because it's basically surrounded by other plants that aren't affected by it. So this is very much telling of our agricultural systems, also with knowledge, ways of thinking. We want diversity of language, diversity of ideas, so that we can make better systems. And then on the far right is more of a forest ecology system where we grow our plants, we're growing everything that we need, but we also create habitat so that the bees can come in. We feed the bees, we feed the wasps, we feed the beetles, because they are in eating our pests, parasitizing the pests on the plants. So we can actually create habitat within our garden spaces that attracts the pollinators, attracts the beetles, attracts the parasitic wasp and the other predators to help our plants grow even further. So this again is what we think in permaculture is about community. And each one of these little circles, you can imagine that's, let's say they were cabbage, that could also be a tree. So in permaculture, things scale up. If a system works well small, it needs to be able to scale up large. If you can scale it up, it's a viable system. If it won't go to scale, there's something else that needs to be fixed. I like to show these pictures also, just as an example of beauty and functionality. If they've ever done flower arranging, we can look at flowers and we go, that's beautiful. Something in our brain tells us that's the way it should look. You can just tell. And people that arrange flowers know this quite well in composing flowers. Then we go to our gardens and we are taught that this is beauty in a garden. This is ordered beauty, right? Well, this is actually chaos. This is the worst thing we could do for plants is force them into a monoculture strip with lots of bare soil in the sun that's heating up over many, many degrees and killing the organisms in the soil. So this is a trained aesthetic, the way we were taught through pictures of how to grow plants. This is not a natural system. This is actually order that creates chaos in the natural system. So that's why we think differently about plants, and we think about it as a forest ecology sort of system. And I'll let you take that. And then I wanted to not take any more time, go into the principles a little bit about gardening, different things, different ways that we garden, but we will talk about this next time of different patterns of how to garden, but I'd like to take some questions about permaculture.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. So in general, people are liking and they ask us some questions, and we will give you the questions in 1 minute, just a quick translation. لنقول انه هلا بالفكره اللي دانيال رجع زادهم خبر اكثر عن permaculture، خبر اكثر قدام مهم اللي حكينا قبل، تنوع البيولوجي، يعني فرجه بوكيه معموله من كذا زهره وفرجه بوتاجين مزروع فيه كذا شغله. انا لإلي بفهم permaculture بصوره لازم نحطها قريبا على فيسبوك بركي وهيك، فرق بين جازون وبين حقله. هي كمان permaculture، هو انه ما نزرع صنف واحد. وقال شغله كثير مهمه، وهذا رح يكون ميبي اول سؤال نساله اياه، كل شيء ما بنقدر نعمل له سكيلينج، يعني ما بيكبر وما بيتطبق على اكبر ما له عازه. فانا وانتوني كنا عم نعمل هالدسكشن من فتره، اذا تتذكر انتوني، حكينا قد ايه في ناس عندهم مبادرات صغيره ليحلوا ازمه النفايات، بس اذا بتزبط مبادرتك بس على البنايه ما بتزبط على المدينه وعلى البلد، يعني ما لنا مبادره ناجحه. وهيدي الشغله كمان البرماكلتشر بدنا نلاقي حلول تكون تزبط ودائما وبيرماننت، مثل ما كلمه permaculture بتفرجي. اللي بتحب تقول شيء انتوني قبل ما نبلش بالاسئله؟
لا اذا بدك فينا نبلش، اجينا شيء 4-5 اسئله.
انتوني بدك تقول شيء؟
بدي اقول انه permaculture again and again، زدت الجواب، زدت السؤال عم برجع اعيد حالي 1000 مره. عندي شقفه ارض، بدي ابلش اشتغل، بدي ابلش انا اقرر انا شو بدي، انا بدي رش، انا مقتنع بارضي، انا بدي اكون طبيعيه، انا شو بدي اكل، انا شو بقبل طعم الناس. من هالطريق بتبلش الاساس. اليوم عم جرب لنا اياه انه permaculture is something natural، بس كون طبيعي، ما بدها شيء، ما تحسب حسابات، ما تلبس كفوف، مثل ما هي الارض، تكل على ربك ومشي. فعلى الطريقه اللبنانيه خلينا نرجع نتفق واحد شو هو بده، مثل ما بدي اكل بدي طعم الناس، مثل ما انا مقتنع بدي امشي، والطبيعه هي بتصبت حالها بحالها، وفي حلول لكل شيء. فينا نرش بالصابون وبالثوم وبالبصل وبالحر وغيره من الاشياء. فاليوم اللي حكينا فيه فعلا بيفتح القلب وبيعطي حماس وشجاعه لكل واحد عنده شقفه ارض يقول انا ما بستسلم وبدي ابلش. بنبلش بالاسئله. مارك لك.
يلا إلي رح أسأل أنا أول سؤال. So Daniel, the first question is permaculture. That if you see the comments, people are liking permaculture. They are saying that we have to start small and everyone can make a change. We can do more. We just have to hope. So you know, it's too much poetry sometimes. So the first question is, so permaculture is something that, you know, it's a trend. or is and now we are like we will be more than 7 billion or more. Can permaculture feed the world? Is it really poetry, or is it something applicable?
Right. That's a very good question. Permaculture is an ethic, it's a paradigm, it's principles, and more or less a belief system about how to live and how to grow food. Can permaculture feed the world? Permaculture is not a biscuit. Permaculture is a practice. So if people were feeding themselves 200 years ago, if people were growing their own food for many, many generations, doing it themselves and growing it, it can. But it is about understanding your environment. And as, again, in permaculture, we say, every solution is site-specific. Can permaculture principles used in Argentina feed Argentina? Absolutely. Based on Argentine climate, Argentine soils, and Argentine practices, right? So they can feed themselves. In Beirut, in Lebanon, in Senegal, in Haiti. I see in Haiti, I've been there many times, one of my favorite countries to go to. I watched the farmers for generations. They have been growing their own food and feeding themselves and all the villages around them at the same time. But they're using practices that keep the soil healthy. And so it can be. I have to also say is we need to define what is food, right? Is it food from the 1950s, or is it Doritos and Pepsi and, sorry, my sponsors maybe, right? What is food? Food is not 90% of the things that you buy in a store. Food is vegetables, food is meat, food is, say, milk, food is fruit, those kinds of things in its raw state. Many things that people eat as food is not actually food in itself. Ask, of course, a vegan will tell you this, vegetarians will tell you this too, right? The differences in their lives and their diet. And my friends, some friends of mine from India, and I hear about their diet there, very restricted, very organic. They are feeding themselves quite well on that type of food. Now, the amount of food that we need to grow, again, needs to be defined. What is regular? And I think that sometimes we're expressing a need on the world that is based on a belief system that we have that is not natural and is not what the world can provide.
Thank you, Daniel. I don't know, Anthony, I think that you should say something here.
Yes, I'm going to say it in English probably for you to understand. I've been into food for a very, very long time. And as you said, food has been changing for the last 10 years, at least when I started talking about food. And I've been saying again and again and again, and everybody hearing me talk about Lebanon and every interview I've given is what makes Lebanon special is that food in Lebanon tastes food, very simply. Vegetables in Lebanon taste like vegetables, and fruits in Lebanon taste like vegetables. And this is what makes Lebanon one of the most beautiful countries on earth. And food has been going places that probably we don't know, we don't know how to explain, and we don't accept. And permaculture is one of the things that brings us back to basics, to nature, to the original thing, part of things where food is just food. Food is nature. Food is everything that you find out there. Food is everything our ancestors have been eating for the last 1,000 years or so. So what you said, Daniel, is music to my ears. Yes, go back to nature, go back to natural things, go back to that beauty of life, that amazing gift called life that God gives us.
If I could add one more thing to that too.
Yes.
The other thing that we find out when we grow our own food is how much food you actually need to eat. And I found this myself for sure. When you grow your own food and you have organic food, you actually don't need to eat so much. A lot of people eat a lot of food because they're empty calories. It's volume, it's dense, or it's just fluff, you might say. But when you're eating organically, you find out that you are actually full much faster. So the volume of food that we need to grow to feed the world is actually a lot less than people think, because it's very dense food, it's very good food, and it fills you up quickly.
Thank you so much, Daniel. Before Eli has 3 questions, but I will say something in English and something in Arabic. We have a very beautiful comment from RTL. He said that he thinks that Lebanese have made vegetarian food tolerable. I find this very, very. Anthony maybe can tell us more. But
of course, because as you may all know, probably 70% to 80% of our Lebanese food or Lebanese mesa table or the food we eat at home is naturally vegan and vegetarian. And that is amazing. So imagine that you go to a Lebanese restaurant and you ask for a mesa of shared plates. Probably 80% of them are vegetarian or vegan, and that very naturally. So if you want to eat vegan or you want to become a vegetarian, just have Lebanese food, or more specifically, I would say the Mediterranean diet, which is something very important. It's a medication to the soul, much more than a medication to the body. So focus on Mediterranean diet, read about the Mediterranean diet, and probably, I would say, Daniel, how about, I don't know if you agree, Americans need to learn from eating more Mediterranean food than big, huge portions of fries and burgers.
Oh, yes, absolutely. We have, of course, we have what they call, the Greek salad. That's what they call it, right? And then I have to go and see what actually is in that salad. But for sure, is when I've been there and traveling other areas and I eat what the local food is, it's the best. I know that when I was in, actually it was in Portugal, and had an orange off a tree, and I didn't realize it was the first time I had actually had an orange off of a tree, and it was like everything else again. I had not eaten an orange in my entire life, if this was what it was supposed to be. And the food that's being, like you're eating in the Mediterranean diet, that is so healthy, and it's also usually local. It's usually fresh, right, and within the community. So yeah, that's for sure. And a lot of what's happened in the US in the last few years, the packaged food has gone way down. People are shopping what we call perimeter shopping. They go to the bakery, they go to the produce department, they go to the meat department and the dairy. They don't go in the lanes anymore because they're looking for basically the fresh produce and the fresh products.
Yes, amazing. So نقول على السريع شو نحكى لحد هلا. نحكى انه البرماكلتشر ايه فيها تكون اذا بدكم اذا بدنا الحل، بس مش نقلد بعض كيف ما كان. يعني مش بلبنان نعمل شو بيعملوا الامريكان، لازم بلبنان نزرع شو بينزرع بلبنان حسب طقس لبنان، حسب شو جدودنا بلبنان كانوا يعملوا، وزيت الشيء بكل البلدان حوالينا وهيك. بس شغله كثير مهمه، وهون انا بدعيكم تحضروا فيلمين على نتفليكس بتصيروا فيجيتيريان دغري. واحد اسمه سيسبيرسي، واحد اسمه كوسبيرسي. اكيد فيهم كثير مغالطات واكزاجريشنز، بس بحلوا الفكره. فعم نكتشفوا هلا بهيدا الدسكشن، وهيدا هلا انطوني هيدا هيك بيسالونا اوقات ليش انه شو عم نعمل انا وياك. هلا هيدا الجواب، لانه اساس كل شيء هو الاكل. اساس كل شيء، لانه نحن عم نزرع لناكل. سو اول فكره دانيال عم بيقول لنا اياها، لازم نعمل definition. شو definition بالعربي؟ انه الديفينيشن فهمتوا علينا لشو معناتها الاكل اصلا. اوكي، مثل ما قال دانيال انه اذا الاكل بده يكون، مش رح اقول شو هو قال زيت الماركت، بس اذا الاكل بده يكون برجرز وناجتس وخبار شيء، اذا الاكل بده يكون مثلا تبوله وفتوش وعطفينا المطرح شيء ثاني. سو بدنا نعمل ديفينيشن لشو الاكل هون. انطوني خبر اشياء كثير حلوه بالانجليزي، وبعدين لازم نعرف قد ايه بدنا ناكل. سو هول كلمتين كثير مهمين لتقدر بيرماكلتشر تحل الموضوع كله. سو ايه فيها تزبط. بس هيك ما بعرف اذا ترجمت مزبوط، اذا بتحبوا تساعدوني الي وانطوني، اذا لا بنبلش بالاسئله.
You did definition يعني تعريف او تحديد.
اوكي.
هلا تذكرتها.
So just I said that there are two documentaries on Netflix. One is called Seaspiracy and one Cowspiracy. I don't know if you're familiar with them, Daniel. They talk about maybe shifting to vegetarian and so on, but we will not now discuss it. We'll move to other questions.
Okay, let's say that we're really impressed of what you said, Daniel, and the discussion overall. I will bring a little bit the discussion into, we will adapt it into Beirut and Lebanon, since we received a lot of questions about
Yes.
Okay, you hear me now? Okay, so I said that I will bring the discussion more into the local here. So we received a very good question that Lebanon has been suffering an economic crisis since 2019. It's been almost 2 years, and a new trend has been emerged, especially since the Beirut port blast last year, and it's planting the rooftops and the balconies with whatever the plantation is. What do you think of this? Is this effective the way it has been done, and people, NGOs, and communities are doing it, or you think it's not so much effective? What's your opinion about the way it has been done?
For growing like on rooftops, things like that, urban?
Yeah, especially in Beirut. I don't know if you followed a little bit how the process has been done. So to buy everywhere and every crop, and to plant it, for example, a mass of tomatoes and a mass of cucumbers everywhere. And
to explain a little bit more the question, we had a trend in Lebanon because of COVID and because of the economic crisis that you're following. Many people asked other people to start growing on balconies, on rooftops, and it became a trend. At the end of the day, many were deceived because they discovered that they maybe paid more, paid less. So what's the problem? Is it good? Isn't good? Did they do it wrong?
Right. So part of what we work with in permaculture and ecological design in general is, of course, you have to observe. And what's very important, especially in urban settings, balconies, rooftops, is that they are microclimates. Every side of a house or a building is a microclimate. Every balcony facing different ways is a microclimate. Each one of those requires a specific type of plant. So if you were facing south and it's hot and sunny all the time, you're not going to be growing greens there, right? You may grow tomatoes, peppers, things like that, eggplant, things that don't mind the hot sun. If you want to do cucumbers and vines and things like that, the eastern side is very good for that. On the western side, though, it also is very hot during the day. It all very much depends. But what we always say too, if you don't have the land, go up. So if you can trellis vine crops, tomatoes, cucumbers, squash, all sorts of melons, things like that. If you can go up beans, go up trellises and use the sky. You have a lot more growing space when you go up than when you're down. As far as the cost goes for doing that, many people will have to either create their soil or find soil to bring in and amend it in order to get that done. If you're growing your own food, of course, that's the best way to go. It's very difficult to grow enough to go commercial in an urban setting unless you have a very large space. It's very expensive to do that. So in many cases where I see people growing on rooftops, when there's a very large field just close by, the first place to go is on the land, as much as possible in the real soil. The second place to go is up in the sky in trellises. And I myself did most of my gardening in pots. I have a greenhouse. Actually, I sold my farm, but I had a greenhouse. I did not plant in the ground, but I grew in large pots. Anything that will hold soil, boxes, things like that. So in an urban setting, especially on a rooftop with winds and exposure, the soil just needs to be contained. It don't need a very big pot for peppers, right? Maybe about a meter wide, half a meter wide sometimes for these very small plants. They don't need much. So you can actually have a lot of pots that you can move around in a space, bring them outside once they've started. When it gets too hot, shade them off or bring them in. The nice thing about working with pots is that it's portable. Then when that crop is done, you pour those pots into a compost, you mix it up, let it compost for a while, and you start over. So in an urban setting, I think you use container gardening is basically what you would call it. And also trellising might be the best way to grow those types of that kind of food.
Okay, so just to brief in Arabic a little bit what you replied, Daniel. So Daniel عم بيقلنا على السؤال اللي سألناه عن الزرع على السطوح وعلى البلكين، عم بيخبر انه كل منطقة او كل بيت او ايفن بالبيت الواحد كل بلكون عنده مايكرو كلايمت او مناخ مصغر معين للمطرح المحطوط فيه البو تبعنا او مطرح ما بدنا نزرع. بالطبيعه مش كل شيء بيزبط شو ما كان، كرمال هيك نحن اوقات بنواجه بروبلم. فور اكزامبل اذا بنزرع بندوره بمطرح فيه كثير هواء او ما كثير تجي الشمس، اكيد رح نواجه امراض وما رح تنجح معنا. عم بيقول انه احسن طريقه انه نحن نعرف توجه الشمس وين ونعرف الحراره عنا وكل هول القصص. وثاني احسن طريقه غير انه نزرع يعني على البلكون تبعنا هو انه اذا بدكم نحط نعلق، ما بعرف اذا عم اقولها مزبوط، اذا عم نعلق ونحط عربيشات. يعني فور اكزامبل فينا نزرع كوسه وفينا نزرع خيار وفينا نزرع فاصوليا ولوبيا وكل هول القصص. اذا نحن بنعمل بنخليهم يعربشوا، يعني بنخليهم يطلعوا شوي عن البلكون او الروف توب تبعنا لحتى ياخذوا اكثر شمس واكثر هواء من المطرح الموجودين فيه. سو بريفلي هيدا اللي عم بيقوله دانيال. الفكره هي مش دائما ظابطه نزرع شو ما كان وين ما كان، لازم نعرف المطرح اللي نحن موجودين فيه.
شو ثاني السؤال انا ايدي؟
Okay, so the second question, Daniel. So you've been teaching in several countries and you've been designing systems in several countries. What makes Lebanon special, and what system? I don't want to go fast, but what makes Lebanon special, and what system goes in Lebanon, in our small gardens, in our rooftops, in our urban places?
Right. Well, there's so many. Let's just say, besides the people, what makes Lebanon so special is the fact of where it is in the Mediterranean, the climate that comes through there. And of course, I am a skier. I was a downhill race coach for many years. So the fact that I can see bananas on the shoreline and there's a ski resort in the mountains tells you that there is a huge ability to grow almost anything. Anything in the world can be grown in Lebanon. Plus you have the Shuf, you have Mount Lebanon, you have all these different areas with the mountain ranges. So there's so many different things that can be grown there. So the other thing is that there is a culture, an agricultural culture in the mountains, from the villages. So there is actually so much wealth of knowledge. And I know it was the breadbasket, right, of the Middle East for centuries. So it has soil, it has water, it has the climate. I know things are changing with climate change and things, but the nice thing it also has slope, which means you can move water. It has a changing different climate, so you can grow different kinds of food. So in a very small area, and I tell this to my friends all the time, is that people think Lebanon is this huge country. And I said, it should be. It should be respected like a huge country because they have everything that a country needs, you know. And a lot of countries do not have the resources that Lebanon has with the water. I've been to the caves. I've been to the different areas in the mountains. The history of the cedars. It's just amazing. It's a jewel ecologically and it's a jewel agriculturally. So it can be self-sustaining, and I think what Anthony was saying, with 70% of the food is actually vegan or organic, I would have to assume, and actually Spain is very similar in nature. They can grow pretty much all the food that they need for their entire population very easily, if it wasn't for exports and the economic, government policy. Again, what can I say? Things happen, but it is. What's in Lebanon and what makes it special, it has such diversity of land, such diversity of climate, that you can actually have a lot of great products growing in a very small area.
So Daniel, Anthony, on his channel, he keeps saying something like, Lebanon أحلى بلد بالعالم, which translates into Lebanon is the most beautiful country in the world. And I think that the answer you just had is simply an amazing 1 minute, if you want, resume or briefing of Lebanon the way we see it. Because unfortunately, many Lebanese don't see it like this, but we see it as you just explained it. So I'll translate what you have said, and then maybe we hear Eli and Anthony, and we start concluding our first session. اللي جاوبه دانيال انه اللي بيخلي لبنان اذا بدكم شو بميزاته، هو انه هو كان يجي على لبنان يطلع انه عندنا موز حد البحر ويطلع يلاقي الثلجات. هيدا الشيء بتعرفوا الموز منا لبنانيه، بس هذا بدل قد ايه بهذا البلد الصغير في تنوع بيولوجي فينا نزرع تقريبا كل شيء. اصلا انا وانتوني بنضل نحكي عن هالموضوع كل الوقت يعني. فهيدا الشيء بيميز لبنان. هو قال انه رفقاته بامريكا بيطلعوا قد ما بيسمعوا لبنان برا وهيك فاكرين لبنان شيء بلد كثير كبير. هو بقول لهم منه كبير كثير صغير، بس لازم نعطيه الاحترام مثل البلد كثير كبير، لانه عندهم كل شيء واكثر من شو البلد عايز، من تربه لمي لتقس لكل هالاشياء يعني. فحلو كيف هو فسر لبنان جاي من حدا بيطلع علينا من برا، خاصه بهالفتره منيح نكون عم نشوفها هيك. هيك على السريع شو قال انطوني إلي، ما شو بتحبوا تقولوا اذا بعد عنا شو سؤال؟
انطوني.
أنا بدي أقول thank you so much, thank you for watching, thank you for enjoying, thank you Daniel. You said amazing things about our beloved country, and we need it in such times. So your words of hope and your words of encouragement are amazing. Thank you for Mark for having us, and I'm very honored and proud to have you on this channel. And we hope that people will watch more and more these amazing instructions and learning, and we have the same people coming again and more views as of next Monday and so on. So Mark, I'll keep the last word and ready for you, and we'll close, hoping to see each other again in the upcoming days.
So we're really honored, and we thank you so much, Daniel, for this, let's say, at first ethical and philosophical conversation that you did. And for the next session, Daniel will be speaking about how to plan an urban farm. We will enter more into the details, and keep watching us, and let's hope a very good next session.
So أنا رح أقول بالعربي إنه يعني شكرا كثير كبير لدانيال على اللي حكينا عنه. بهيدا المرة حكينا عن شو هي البرماكلتشر، لأنه كان لازم نحكي شو هي يعني تفهموها كلكم، وهيك شغلات تكونوا حبيتوا. في عنا التنين الجاي بذات الوقت من 6 ل 7 على اليوتيوب شانل تبع أنطوني. رح نجرب كمان نحلها على فيسبوك عنا إن شاء الله تثبت. رح نحكي عن موضوع الفود بالديتيلز، يعني رح يكون في 4 سيشنز. المرة الثانية رح يكون كيف نزرع إذا بدكم بالمدن، أو بسموها الزراعة الحوضرية اللي جاي من نزرع بالحوض، إن كان على البلاكين إن كان على السقف. رح نفوت بالديتيلز لأنه دانيال مسافر على كتير بلدان وشايف الأشياء كلها، ورح يحكينا عن قد ما فينا عن زراعة بلبنان، لأنه هو مقضى أكثر من 4 أشهر بلبنان، جاي أكثر من 5 سفرات. So Daniel, thank you for this amazing session as always. I always keep learning from you. Thank you so much. The last words are for you.
Oh, thank you, Mark. Anthony, also, I really appreciate talking to everybody in Lebanon again, and hope to get back there soon. And also, I wanted, last words would be, I am part of United Designers, uniteddesigners.org, and we are an international design group of designers in doing team design. So when I talk about permaculture and community and sharing, we actually are all individual people who are learning permaculture and permaculture design, and we work together in teams. So the work that I'm doing is not just from me, but it also, I am learning from we have 63 people all over the world that have taken our design course for ecological design. But United Designers is about building this expertise in every country, just like we're talking about today, so that we all are working on the same page and we can share all this information. So my co-founder, Marushka Kierkegaard, the other designers with United Designers, I really have to lean on them and thank them for helping me move forward with this initiative and also bringing you this information. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for watching. ميرسي للكل لأنه كنتوا معنا اليوم. إن شاء الله كنا على قد يعني عند حسن ظنكم. شو بقولوا مارك؟
حسن ظنكم.
مظبوط. لكن نحن نلتقى الجمعة الجاية بزوم كونفرنس كول ليرنينج سموها بدكم اياها، ومن هلا لوقتها عندنا كثير اشياء حلوه بريمير كل يوم عشيه نحن عودناكم عليهم. ابتداء من بكره طالع على الهرمل مع مارك كمان في عندنا فيديوز حلوين، وهلا عم خلص الفيديو تبع التونه فيشنج اللي صورناه اليوم، وكثير اشياء يعني وعدناكم بثلاث اربع فيديوهات كل يوم.